the next installment of things to learn that are non-science-y. This time, I'm going to teach you how to bake bread. Now, a lot of people don't like to bake bread because they think it's putsy and it takes a long time or it's really hard and things go wrong. And it's true, but not with the recipe that I'm going to show you. This is something that my grandmother has done for as long as I can remember, and she gave me the recipe so that I can bake it for my family too. So every weekend, I go through these same steps that I'm going to teach you, and I end up baking 2 loaves of bread, which last me a whole week full of lunches, and usually we even have a little bit left over on the weekend for toast. So if you follow these steps in this recipe, you can bake bread every weekend too, and it's not hard and it doesn't take very long. All right, so let's get started. All right, it has been a week now, so it's Saturday morning, and I am ready to start the process of baking my bread. My starter that I made last week has been sitting in the fridge all week, and so now it's time to get it ready for the first part. There's several parts to this recipe. Each one does not take very long. It just requires you to be on top of it and remember it. Okay, first thing is that you need a 1/4 cup of sugar. Okay, so we've got our, and it's just one. When we made the starter, we had 3/4 of a cup. This one is just 1 cup, so, or 1/4 cup. So we have this is going to go in there. There's our 1/4 cup. The next thing is we need 4 tablespoons of potato flakes, so same as the starter. And I left this in here just to show you. Normally I'll take them out, but if you see this when you are, I don't know if you can really see it in focus, but if you see this when you are scooping out the potato flakes, or if you maybe you open up your starter and you'll see them floating around in the top. All this is, I don't want you to think it's like a bug or anything. All this is that when they were drying the potato flakes, they started from real potatoes because, of course, you got the ones that are made from real potatoes. During the drying process, sometimes they get a little bit more toasted. Doesn't really matter if you leave it in there or not. The nice thing is that they tend to float to the top. So if you want to take a spoon and just scoop them out a little bit, you can. I do that when I see them. Otherwise, if you want to leave them in there, it doesn't hurt anything. It's no big deal. So I'm going to throw that one away. The rest of our potato flakes are good. I already have 4 tablespoons that are already measured out in here, so I'm going to dump that in here too. And then the last one is warm water, 1 cup of warm water, just like when we made the starter. Remember I told you last time when we made the starter, you want to make sure that it's nice and warm, but it's not hot. Hot water kills yeast because yeast is alive. They're single-celled organisms. Sorry, I snuck a little science in there, but there you go. They are alive, which means that they need to be fed, and you can't boil them. So just warm water, but not hot water. So there's that for the warm water. You're going to stir it up again. Just make sure everything is all stirred nicely. And if you have some little pieces of sugar or little pieces of flakes that don't seem to be blending very well, the longer they sit in the water, the more they're going to come apart. So just leave them. It's fine. They'll get broken up later. All right. So, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave that just like when we first made our starter. We're going to cover it all the way tight. Back it off a little bit so that it has room to rattle, room to move, and then we're going to let it sit on the counter until the evening. So it's important that you make sure that you do this in the morning so that it's ready to go in the evening, because that's when you're going to do the next step. So we'll just set that on the back of the counter till it becomes evening. Here we are back in the evening to mix up our bread. Our starter has been sitting on the counter all day and it is ready to incorporate into our mixture. So the things that we're going to be needing is we need 1 cup of that starter. We need 1.5 cups of warm water. Again, not hot because we don't want to kill the yeast, but warm. We want 1 tablespoon of salt, just regular salt, 1/2 cup of regular vegetable oil, and 6 cups of flour. Now the only thing that I don't have ready to dump in is the starter, and that's because I want to give you a little bit of a hint. Since we have solid and liquid in there, the solid tends to settle down towards the bottom, so I want to give you a little bit of advice on how to scoop it out so that you really get a good amount of starter that has both solid and liquid into it. Okay, well, first of all, what I'm going to start with, I always like to start with the flour because it's the putziest one and I like to get it over with. I've already have my flour all measured, so this is 6 cups. And when you are measuring flour, it's different than when you are measuring sugar. So I'm going to set this in here and I'm going to show you what you need to do. When you are measuring into a cup, and so this is my 1 cup measure, with sugar, you can just scoop it and then shake it, and then that's fine. Flour doesn't measure the same way. It needs to be fluffy and it needs to have air in it, and you want to try to keep it as light as possible. And so what you want to do is you want to take a big spoon and then just kind of shake it into the cup. And so you just shake it in there, make sure that it has plenty of air. Don't pack it down. Like I said, sugar you can just scoop and that's fine. Brown sugar, when you're using that, packs pretty well. And that, when you put it in, the way that it's measured is you have to pack it. So you put it in, you scoop it in there, and then you do pack it down. Once you have it up like this, you can see it's kind of heaping a little bit. So you want to I take as straight a part of the spoon as possible. If you want to use the back of a butter knife, that would be fine too. And you just smooth off the top, and then you can pour in there whatever it is you have. But when you're measuring flour, it's really, really important to make sure that you are keeping the flour light, that you aren't packing it down, because otherwise it's not the right amount. You'll end up with it's going to be too stiff. You want it to not be quite so stiff. All right, so we have our 6 cups of flour. So I'm going to pour that into my bowl that I'm mixing everything in. Why am I not leaving it in this bowl and putting it in that one? Well, because this one, the yellow one, doesn't have as high of sides as my white one. My white one has higher sides, and I need the high sides for how tall it's going to get when it rises. All right, so I've got my flour. I'm going to take my 1/2 cup oil. So I have just regular vegetable oil, so I'm going to put that in there. I have my 1.5 cups of warm, not hot, but warm water. I'm going to pour those in there. And I have my 1 tablespoon of salt. So I'll put that in there too. Okay, so that's in there as well. Now for the starter, I'm going to move this out of the way. As you can see that my container is different. That's because this is starter that I've been using for a couple of months now. And so this is what I have been using, and you can kind of see that when I shake it, you can kind of hear the bubbles. You can see the bubbles. And if you notice, I don't know if you saw that when I shook it, there's a little black thing floating around in there. Remember when we talked about the potato flakes? That would be one of them, and they float to the top, and it's not a big deal. So I'm going to take my spoon that I used earlier for measuring flour, and I'm just going to get rid of that. So there, now it's not in there. All right, so I'm going to use this. It's almost like a ladle, but it's plastic. Try not to use metal unless you can absolutely, if you can help it, don't use metal. All right, you want to stir it up so that you have everything completely stirred. And then what I will do is I will set my cup here, tip this on the side, and I stir, 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 and then I scoop out 1 scoop, and I put it in there. And I found that my spoon, if you do this enough times, you might figure out how big your spoon is. My spoon, it takes about 3 full spoons of these to fill 1 cup, roughly. Okay, so again, each time I am stirring, and then I pull out what I'm measuring. There we go, 1 cup exactly. All right, so that's the last piece. I'm going to put that in there. So we've got that. So we've got all of our ingredients. I'm going to take my plastic spoon. I'm going to start out. I will end up getting my hands in here, so of course make sure your hands are clean before you put them in. And you also want to make sure while you're doing this, you want to think about, okay, where is a warm place that is safe that animals won't get to? And you know your homes better than I do. Where is a place that your bread can sit, your dough can sit overnight that is somewhat warm. My kitchen's a little bit cold, especially in the winter. It's cold because it doesn't have a basement below it. I think it was an addition. It's an old house. And so what I do is I take my bread dough in the winter, I take it up to where our bedrooms are because the hallway is usually pretty warm. And so I find a nice spot on the bookshelf where it will sit and it will be nice and warm while it's in there. All right, so as you're doing this, you want to make sure, scoop it up from the bottom, check and see, do I still have some flour? Yes, I do. Okay, and so you want to just keep on stirring, keep on turning. If you need to get your fingers in there, that's great. Looks like I might not have to this time. Usually I do have to get my fingers in there, but this seems to be working okay. All right, so yes, it's going to be pretty sticky, but you can see that it's kind of coming together there. Try to scrape it down the sides, get everything in there, and it looks like we are done with that. All right, so we have our dough. Next thing that we need to do is put something plastic, some plastic wrap over the top of it. The reason why you want to do that is, if you think about like Play-Doh or any other kind of doughy substance, if you leave it open to the air for any length of time, it starts to get a crust on the top of it, and we don't want that to happen. So we're not going to butter this, we're not going to grease it, we're not doing anything. We're just going to take this. My grandma puts it over the top, just leaves it over the top of the bowl. I don't have very good luck with that. I still end up with kind of some crusty bread at the top. So what I do is I just very gently sort of encourage it. I don't poke it down there because I want the bread to still be able to rise freely, but I just sort of lay it down there so now it is on top of my dough. And I'm going to set it in a reasonably warm place. My favorite place that seems to work pretty good as long as my kitchen is a good temperature is I put it on my stove and I just have it sit there, but you can have it sit on the counter, or like I said, in the winter, we take it upstairs and I put it on the bookshelf, someplace where the cats aren't going to get it. And so wherever that works for you, that's where you want to put it. So we'll check it in the morning. We'll see what's going on. All right, it's the next morning and you can see that our bread has risen. Sometimes it rises a little bit more than this, but this is fine too. You take what you get. And don't freak out if it doesn't go as high as what you're used to, but it has at least doubled in size, which is really what you want. Okay, before you turn it out though, what I like to do is I want to get my pans ready. So these are just, you need 2 of them, and they're regular loaf pans. Don't get the little ones that are intended for banana bread or other dessert breads, things like that. You want the regular size bread pans. Okay, and then you want something, I'm using butter right now because I'm out of shortening, but usually if you have family members that bake a lot, sometimes they'll have a can of shortening, like Crisco is the name brand of one of the shortenings, but take my hand like this. You can use just your fingers, but I don't know, it just feels kind of gross. So take a little bit of butter off of there, and then you want to grease the inside. I try to do it so that everything is, all the parts are greased, but nothing is really showing the butter. So after a little bit, you won't really see the butter anymore. And just kind of move it around to all the sides because we don't want the bread to, these are non-stick pans, but you know, non-stick pans don't not stick. It's like my husband will wax skis every winter before ski season starts at his camp, and the skis that he's waxing are called waxless skis, and that's how they're marketed. But even waxless skis need to still be waxed for some reason, and nonstick pans still need a little bit of help as well, because if you just pour the bread in here, or if you just put it in here, it will still stick. All right, so there's one pan done. Grab some butter for the other one and do this. You want to try to get all the sides and all the corners. Don't forget the corners because the bread will stick in the corners too. You can see my plastic wrap is kind of starting to come apart. It's not really on my hands anymore, but I'm still kind of using it to spread the
butter around anyway, and that works. And just about done. All right, the next thing you want to do once you get this done is you want to put something over the top of it so it doesn't just soak into the bread and then it's gone. You want to give it some sort of a covering, and you want to use something, whatever it is that you're baking. You want to use more of whatever it is that the thing is made out of. So in this case, bread made out of flour. So I'm going to use flour, and that works out great because I have to put flour on the counter anyway for kneading it. So I just grab a handful, just like that. I just grab a handful out of there, dump it in there, and then shake it around. You want to make sure that you get it on all the sides. Make sure you get it all the way around. And then you have some extra. When you dump it out, you've got a bunch of extra in there. You don't want that. So flip it over, and then it's a drum. There you go. Now it's nice. Okay? Now you have all the extra flour that's in here. Do the same thing. Shush it around. This time you can let it go on the counter because the next step is we have to throw flour on the counter anyway for kneading our bread. So make sure that you have it all out there. And again, we have way too much flour in there, so there. Now I have just enough. Okay, stack them sideways. Don't stack them inside of each other, also known as nesting, because otherwise you'll knock the flour out. All right, so we got our flour on there. Now it's time to turn our bread out. This is kind of my favorite part. I just go like this, boom, and it just pops out. Now, I have a lot that's in there. You can just scrape it out with your hands, and it comes out relatively easy, and then just throw it on there. So take out as much as you want to. And then a cleaning tip, when you put it in the sink, immediately fill it with water. Otherwise this gets all crusty, and it's fine to get out, but it's just easier if you fill it with water right away, and then it sits with water in it and it's easy to clean. So I will do that later when I'm cleaning up. All right, so it's really sticky. I like to very gently turn it around so that it's all covered in flour. If you need a little extra flour at some point, I've got my jar here, so that's fine. And try to get as much off as I can. All right, so now you have this big lump of dough. First thing you want to do, you've got two pans, and so you want to separate it into two. So I kind of figure out where the middle is, rip it in half. And that's roughly the middle, okay? So I'll put one right there to wait. Now this, and this is a grandma trick, 7 times. You only want to mess with it 7 times, okay? So kneading, you're just taking your hands. It's like you're doing, I don't know, resuscitation. You're just going to squish it. And if you're really angry, you can really squish hard because, you know, get your frustrations out. 1, and then you go 2, and you fold it over. 3, 4, might need a little extra flour. 5, 6, 7. That's all you do. Don't do more. And then a trick that I learned is don't put it in a ball because it has a hard time stretching out. Stretch it out so that it's like this. It's kind of loaf shaped. You take your pan and you take it and lay it in your pan just like that. So now it's loaf shaped and it's just sitting in the pan. Set that aside. Do the same thing with the other one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Squish, 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 squish. Now it's loaf shaped. Put it in your pan like this. All right. Next thing you're gonna do, I have on here my stove that has my light on. That's all you want. All of my dials are off. We don't have anything going on baking wise. You don't want to warm. If you turn on the oven even to warm, you'll kill the yeast. So we just want the light on, just a little something. Even that little bitty light in there will give off just enough heat to go along with the chemical reaction that's going on with the bread. A little bit of science. Put your bread in there. Put your bread in there. Good night, bread. Have a nice nap.
Okay, bread's looking like it is about ready to be able to bake. Now, some people will take the bread out and preheat the oven, but I don't like to do that. So I'm going to just leave them in there, and I'm going to go up to my oven, and I'm going to turn it on to bake. You want to bake at 350, and then the timer, I'm going to set the timer for 50 minutes. My recipe says an hour, but I find that an hour is a little bit too much. 50 minutes gets it nice and slightly brown on the top, but it's still soft on the inside, and I just like it better. I feel like a whole hour ends up making it, I don't know, a little dry. So we'll come back in an hour and see how we did. Okay, our bread is done baking, so we're going to take it out of the oven. And we have one loaf, and we have our second loaf. So here are our 2 loaves of bread. Now if you notice, I put them on a cooling rack. That's so that we can get some air circulation underneath as they start to cool. And sometimes I'll even do this right away. One of the things I like to do is to let it cool all around, as I will dump out the loaves of bread. Remember, they're hot, so you can see a little bit of steam coming off of them. Steam, not water vapor. And flip that one over. And I'll dump the other one out too. Again, we have some steam coming off of it. Flip that one over too. And I'll let those cool for a little bit. Now you can, if you don't eat bread as fast in your home as we do, you can freeze one. So you'll put them in a bag. An old bread bag would be fine. Just make sure it's clean on the inside. And you can put it in the freezer and take it out when you're ready to use it. Otherwise, if you go through a couple loaves of bread a week, then you can just put it in a bag and stick it in your cupboard, and it'll sit there and it's just fine. Or you could put it in the fridge and it'll last a little bit longer. They don't last as long as store-bought bread. You really want to eat them within about 2 weeks, otherwise they'll start to mold because they don't have preservatives in them. But they make excellent toast. You can change up the recipe if you want to put chocolate chips in them or blueberries, or something I like to do is put cinnamon and sugar in them and roll them up, and that makes really fun breakfast bread. You can, instead of putting them in loaves, you can put them into cookie sheets or muffin tins, and you could make different rolls for your family. So if you wanted to have that at sometime for dinner, that would be great. So I hope you enjoyed learning about the bread, and it smells great. So try this at home. All right.